The quadratic formula is something that will work for solving every single quadratic as long as it's in standard form. And it just takes, it's more tedious and it takes a little bit longer to do. So it's not something that we teach you first, because if you can do one of the other methods, it's faster. And the other methods we also will be using, for example, factoring, we use that in a lot of other parts in Algebra 2. So we don't want to just jump to this method all the time, because I want to make sure you know how to use the other methods as well. The quadratic formula is using our standard form. So we have our ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So we need to be in that form in order to start picking out the numbers for our quadratic formula. So we're going to pick out our a, our b, our c, and we're using them for different things. The quadratic formula says take the opposite of b, plus or minus, and what we're really doing is shortcutting formula. So instead of having one whole thing where it's a plus and then another whole thing where we put a minus in there, we're putting them together, and I'll show you how that works as we're solving, because we'll eventually branch out. The square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. And what that's going to end up doing is it's going to be able to help us with how everything is working. Just one thing to kind of notice in here is if you look right here, this opposite of b over 2a, we've been using that quite a bit. So think about where we've done that. And hopefully you come up with our axis of symmetry. So that's kind of where that part is. It's really telling us here's where our axis of symmetry. And then from there, we're able to kind of move some other pieces. This second part here, that's called our discriminant. And that really is going to tell us how many solutions we have. And it determines number of solutions. And as we go through a couple problems solving it, that will make a little bit more sense. So if that whole discriminant equals 0, there's one solution. If it equals a negative number, there's no solution, because it's not possible to be able to take a square root at this point of a negative number. Or if it equals a positive number, there are two solutions. We can't have more than two solutions. There's only two times that we can cross that x-axis, because our graph has that U or an upside down U shape to it. We've already talked about that first part, that the axis of symmetry is related because it's a part of, so the opposite of b over 2a is a part of the quadratic formula. And then again, we've written it up there. So no solutions is going to be a negative discriminant. And then one solution would be a 0 discriminant. So here's how the whole thing works. So if I'm looking at my piece, it's sometimes helpful to say that a equals 2. B equals negative 5, and C equals 3. So writing that down is going to help me when I'm grading it to see that if you got the wrong answer, that maybe you just picked the wrong numbers for A, B, and C. It has to equal 0. So in this case, it's already done. And now I'm just going to put in whatever according to my quadratic formula. So in this case, it's going to be negative 5 squared. Our A would be next, which is going to be a 2. And our C is a 3. All over 2A, which is just another 2. So at this point now I can go ahead and start solving. So negative times negative 5 is just going to be a 5. We're going to keep that plus or minus first. And I have 25 minus 8 times 3. Sorry, child just came in. 24 over 4. And then I'm just going to go ahead and solve this down a little bit. 5 plus or minus the square root of 1 over 4. At this point, I'm going to break it into 2. I have 5 plus the square root of 1 is 1 over 4. And then I have 5 minus 1 over 4. So really, again, we have two problems. But instead of writing out the whole things, we just break it down at the end. So 6 over 4, or 3 halves, or you could have said 1.5. And this one's 4 over 4, or 1. So my two solutions is x equals 1 or x equals 1.5. That would be where that graph crosses the y-axis. Oh, I could have written them down below. We'll just move that. So our next one, just so you can see it more than once here, we need to make it equal to 0. So 2x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. If it's not equal to 0, it does not work. So in this case, our a equals 2, our b equals negative 1, c equals negative 6. Let me just shift these a bit because my last one's not fitting on. So same idea. We're using that quadratic formula. So negative, and then my b is a negative 1, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. You do not need to have this memorized. There's a good chance you will. There's some fun songs that deal with this, so you can kind of listen to those and see if you can get those stuck in your head, but eventually you just do it enough that you have it memorized. Negative times negative 1 is just like negative 1 times negative 1, so positive. Then we end up with the square root of 1, and then we're going to multiply 4 times 2 times 6, so plus 48 over 4. At this point, we divide it into 2. Don't forget to take the square root of that 49 if it's helpful. Feel free to write out one more step here. And then go ahead and now we can do our 2 different pieces because that's just a mistake that people tend to make. So we do 1 plus 7 over 4 and 1 minus 7 over 4. So 8 over 4 is 2. So possible solution is 2. And then this one here would be negative 6 over 4, which is negative 3 halves, which equals negative 1.5. Again, we would have 2 solutions. If we get one solution, those 2 would end up just equaling the same number. So we would know typically that, and that's going to happen with that square root is 0. Because in that case, you just, again, get like 1 plus 0, and then divided by the same number, or 1 minus 0. So you have a couple more that you're working through on that section to make sure you understand it. On this one here, we're just doing the discriminant. So just that second part. So I want to make sure it equals 0. And the discriminant, remember, is that b squared minus 4ac. It doesn't really matter if we're taking the square root of it or not, because I really want to look at what my answer is before I take that square root. So a is equal to 6, b equals negative 2, c equals negative 3. So I'm going to take negative 2 squared, remember, to put that in parentheses if you're putting it into a calculator, because otherwise it does word of operation, squares the 2 and multiplies it by a negative 1, which is not what we want. Or just know that it's going to be a positive number and ignore the negative altogether. And 6 times negative 3. So I'm solving this. 4, and then I know it's going to be a plus because it's a negative times a negative. At this point, I really wouldn't need to keep going, but let's just finish it up. And I get 72, which equals 76. It's a positive number, so discriminant is 76. And because it's a positive number, I have 2 solutions. And so if I did the whole quadratic formula, I know I would end up with 2 solutions to that. Let's just do one more, and then you'll have one to do on your own. So on the next one, a equals 2, b equals 5, c equals negative 4. So I'm doing 5 squared minus 4, and that 4 is always in there. A is 2, c is negative 4. So I end up with 25 plus 32, which equals 57. And so I have 2 solutions because it's a positive number. So you have one more to try and check your answer key. And then the quadratic formula one's up above.